Welcome to Dark Testimony. Tonight's story comes from a truck driver. He claims he heard footsteps in the snow trying to break into his cabin. But before we reach that moment, tell me, where are you watching from right now? This is their testimony.
You ever spent so many nights on the road that silence itself feels alive? I have. 8 years behind the wheel of 18-wheelers will do that to a man. Sometimes I think I've had it all. The hum of my engine, the crackle of a radio barely in range, even coyotes howling out in the dark. But that night, the silence had teeth. It wasn't just silence, it was listening. My name's Kevin. I'm a long-haul truck driver, running routes across the states. Most of the time, I like the solitude. I like the way the world folds back when it's just me, the rake, and endless miles of asphalt. There's a rhythm to it, almost meditative. Eat when you're hungry. Pull over when you're tired. Let the snow or rain hammer against the cab like nature's own lullaby. Simple life. Honest life. But if you stay out here long enough, you start collecting stories. Ones you don't tell at truck stops. Because nobody wants to be the crazy guy talking about the weird things he's seen on the road. You bottle them up, keep them locked away like freight too dangerous to unload. I've got one of those stories, and I think it's time I told someone. It happened in December, 2 winters ago. The roads were brutal that week. Snow coming down thick as wool. Highways closing behind me. Whole towns vanishing behind veils of white. Dot. I was hauling double trailers from Oregon toward Illinois, trying to beat the storm east. Didn't work. Somewhere in Montana, past midnight, the sky just caved in on me. Heavy flakes smothered the windshield, the wipers fighting a losing battle. My speed dropped to 20, then 15. Tires crunched in the snow like bone under pressure. Finally, I saw a clearing off the highway. Just a stretch of packed down earth, framed by pines, bowing under ice. I knew I had to stop, push through, and I risked jackknifing the trailers, or worse. I eased the rig into the clearing, the engine rumbling low, like it too was relieved. Inside the cab, it was warm, cocooned against the blizzard. I pulled the curtains across the side windows, a ritual every trucker knows. Keep the outside world out. When the curtains are shut, you pretend the world beyond them doesn't exist. Just you and the truck. Safe. Or so I thought. I ate some leftovers from a cooler, kicked my boots off, and leaned back on the bunk. The wind howled, shaking the trailer doors now and then, but nothing unusual. I closed my eyes. Sleep came slow, the way it does when you know you're in the middle of nowhere. And then I heard it. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Not the wind, not the truck settling. Footsteps. I opened my eyes in the dark, heart hammering. At first, I told myself it had to be an animal. A deer, maybe, or even a bear. But no animal I've ever heard walks like that. Steady, deliberate, one step at a time, circling. The sound moved from the left side of the cab, past the hood, and stopped by my door. I held my breath, every muscle locked. The curtains were drawn, thank God, but I couldn't shake the image of someone, something, standing just inches away from me, separated only by glass and a thin sheet of fabric. The silence stretched. Then came the soft, unmistakable rattle of metal. The lock. Someone was testing the lock on my door. I lay frozen, listening to the faint scrape, the click of the handle shifting, but not opening. My rig was locked from inside, always is, but the sound kept going, slow and methodical, like whoever or whatever was out there wasn't in a rush. Just inches away from me, separated only by glass and a thin sheet of fabric. The silence stretched. Then came the soft, unmistakable rattle of metal. The lock. Someone was testing the lock on my door. I lay frozen, listening to the faint scrape, the click of the handle shifting but not opening. My rig was locked from inside, always is, but the sound kept going, slow and methodical, like whoever or whatever was out there wasn't in a rush. Not from the wind. A voice, low, right outside my window. A woman's voice. Words I couldn't make out. Murmured like she was trying not to wake me. Except I was already wide awake. I swallowed hard, sweat prickling despite the chill. My hand hovered near the horn, but I didn't dare touch it. Instead, I just sat there, pulse pounding in my throat, waiting for the whisper to fade. It didn't fade. It multiplied. A second voice, deeper, a man's. Then a third, high, fragile, like a child. 3 voices now, murmuring in some language I didn't recognize, their tones overlapping in a way that made my skin crawl. I clenched my eyes shut, hoping, praying it would all vanish when I opened them again. But deep down, I knew I wasn't alone in that clearing, and the longer I sat there, the more certain I became that whatever was outside wanted in. You ever notice how sound changes when you're terrified? Every creak, every gust, every pop of settling metal sounds sharpened, amplified, like your senses are begging to catch danger before it catches you. That's how it was for me, lying there in my cab, trying to breathe silently, Whispers slid along the edges of the truck like smoke. I kept telling myself, stay calm. Don't move. Don't make a sound. But how do you stay calm when you can hear the door handle shifting? Metal ticking against metal. Even though I knew it was locked, even though I double-checked it before bedding down, I couldn't shake the thought. What if the lock turned? What if the door opened by itself? The voices kept coming. Not words I knew, but tones. Low, guttural syllables from the man, softer murmurs from the woman, and the child's strange, sing-song rhythm weaving through it all. My skin crawled, my gut twisted. But the worst part, they weren't speaking to each other. They were speaking to me. They knew I was in there. I shifted on the bunk, just enough to glance toward the curtain covering my side window. For a split second, I thought I saw movement, a darker shadow against the dark, right where the glass should have been. A faint smear of red, as if something had pressed against it. I blinked, and it was gone. I wanted to turn on the engine, blast the headlights, lay on the horn, anything to shatter the suffocating quiet. But what if that was exactly what they wanted? To see me move, to confirm I was inside. Minutes dragged. Then, just as I started convincing myself I could wait them out, I heard it. Crunch, crunch, crunch. The footsteps again. Only this time, more than one pair. I held my breath. They circled the rig, boots, or whatever they were wearing, packing the snow tight. I could track them by sound alone, moving from one side of the truck to the other, then back again, slow and steady. Finally, the crunching stopped near the driver's side window, and then 3 distinct taps on the glass. Not knocks, taps, like fingernails. I clenched my jaw so hard my teeth ached. My pulse throbbed in my temples. Every instinct screaming to pull back the curtain and look. But I didn't. Something told me that if I looked, if I made eye contact, that would be it. The whispers started again, closer this time. The child's voice hummed, almost like a lullaby, a chilling little tune that didn't belong out here in the frozen dark. My stomach turned, then silence. I strained to hear, praying the storm would cover the rest of their noise. But no, silence like that isn't peace. It's a pause. The kind a predator takes before pouncing. I don't know how long I sat there, barely breathing, eyes glued to the curtain. 5 minutes? 10? Long enough for the cold in the cab to sink into my bones. And then, finally, movement. I heard the crunch of snow again, this time leading away from the truck. Step after step, fading into the distance. Relief started to seep in, shaky and fragile. I thought they were gone, but when I finally worked up the nerve to peek through the curtain, I froze. Out there in the snow, leading away from my truck, were footprints. 3 sets. One large, boot-shaped, one smaller, bare, and one tiny. The storm hadn't covered them yet. They cut straight through the clearing, back into the tree line. My relief curdled into dread. 'Cause here's the thing, in weather like that, with snow hammering down, footprints don't last long. For them to be that sharp, that defined, they couldn't have been older than a minute. Which meant whatever had been outside my truck, man, woman, and child, hadn't been a trick of my imagination. They were real, and I could still hear faint, far-off whispers drifting from the woods. I should have stayed in the cab. Locked the doors, waited until daylight. That would have been the smart thing, but something about those prints drew me. Curiosity, maybe, or maybe some darker pull. Something that wanted me to follow, because even as my better judgment screamed not to, I found myself sliding into my coat, pulling on my boots, and stepping down into the snow. The storm clawed at my face, but I kept my eyes on the tracks. Step by step, I followed them, straight toward the trees. The snow muffled everything as I stepped out. You ever notice how the world feels when a storm eats all the sound? No birds, no branches snapping, no distant highway hum. Just the hiss of flakes slamming into your hood, and the thud of your bone heart in your ears. That's what I walked into. An empty, smothered silence, where even my breath felt too loud. The footprints were clear, almost too clear, pressed deep into the powder. The big ones led, steady and deliberate. The smaller pair walked close beside, dragging slightly, like someone shuffling. And the tiniest ones, the child's, scattered, darting left and right, as if skipping through the snow. But there was no laughter, no voice, just the impression of joy twisted into something else. My rig disappeared behind me as I trudged forward, swallowed by snow and darkness. Every step away from it made me feel less human, like I was leaving behind the last shred of safety I had. But I couldn't stop. Those tracks had a gravity to them, pulling me deeper. The trees rose out of the storm, black spines piercing the white. The footprints cut straight between them, like they knew exactly where they were going. I crouched once, running a glove over the smallest print. Point. It was warm. The snow around the edges hadn't hardened yet, which meant whoever left it had passed through seconds ago. I jerked upright, skin crawling. Warm? In this weather? No way. That's when I heard the whisper again. This time it came from ahead, threading through the trees. A woman's voice, soft and low, syllables curling into one another in a tongue I couldn't recognize. A second voice joined, deep, rasping, more breath than words. Then, faintly, the child's high giggle, muffled like it was underwater. I pressed forward, every nerve screaming at me to turn back. The storm thinned for a moment, just enough for me to see shapes between the trees. 3 of them. My stomach knotted. The man was tall, shoulders hunched, skin so pale it seemed to glow in the storm. His face sagged, flesh grey and loose, lids peeling back from teeth that looked too dark, too long. His hands dangled at his sides, fingers stiff like frozen twigs. The woman, Christ, her head lolled to one side, neck twisted wrong, hair hanging wet and matted over half her face. What I could see of her skin was torn, black veins spidering across it, patches of raw red where flesh should have been whole. Her lips moved constantly, whispering, breath fogging the air. And the child almost looked normal, maybe 8, 9 years old. No decay, no wounds, just eyes too wide, too still, shining like glass marbles. He lifted a hand and waved. Not at the storm, at me. I stumbled back, boots crunching. The man's head snapped toward me, joints cracking like ice breaking on a lake. The woman's whisper grew louder, urgent, as if warning me or calling me closer. I couldn't tell, and the boy kept waving, smile frozen on his face. I should have run. I wanted to, but my legs locked. The man took a step forward, snow crunching under his feet. He lifted his hand and gripped the air like he was wrapping it around my throat. At the same time, my chest tightened, breath catching sharp in my lungs. My pulse stuttered, each beat weaker than the last. The woman pressed her hands against her face, then slid them down slow, peeling her features with them. Flesh stretched, sagged, until her mouth was too wide. Teeth black and broken, tongue swollen and grey. Her whisper turned into a wet gurgle. And the boy, he just tilted his head, like he couldn't understand why I wasn't waving back. The pressure in my chest grew unbearable. I dropped to one knee, snow burning through my jeans. My vision swam. Through the blur, I saw the child step closer, reaching out his tiny hand. And then, just as suddenly, it stopped. The man dropped his arm. The woman fell silent. The boy lowered his hand. All 3 of them turned at once, heads jerking toward the deeper woods, as if hearing some silent call. Without another glance at me, they moved. The man leading, the woman gliding, the boy skipping. Together, they disappeared into the blizzard, their forms swallowed by white. My chest heaved, air flooding back in painful gasps. I coughed hard, clutching the frozen ground with shaking hands. My lungs felt raw, like I'd nearly drowned. When I finally looked up, I saw where they were headed. Through the curtain of snow, faint and crooked, rose the silhouette of a house. A roof caved at one side, chimney leaning like a snapped neck, windows black as pits, and the footprints led straight to its door. I don't remember making the decision to follow them. Not clearly, anyway. 1 second I was hunched in the snow, chest still heaving, and the next I was on my feet, moving toward that silhouette like it had a chain wrapped around my ribs. The footprints guided me as much as my own legs did. They cut straight through the drifts, untouched by wind or fresh snow, as though the storm itself refused to erase them. Each print looked sharp, almost carved into the earth, and the smallest ones, the boys, seemed fresher with every step, not fading, but multiplying. The house grew clearer as I trudged closer. Sagging porch, wood eaten by rot. Shutters hung crooked, one slapping weakly in the storm. The chimney leaned, its bricks blackened, like it hadn't held fire in 100 years. The roof sagged under the weight of snow, but didn't collapse, like something unseen was still holding it up. I slowed as I reached the porch. The steps groaned under my boots, but the sound didn't match the weight. It was deeper, like the wood moaned in pain, not protest. My gloved hand brushed the railing, and flakes of paint and splinters stuck to my palm. That's when I noticed it. The house smelled alive. Not like mold or mildew, not like rot, but warm, damp, like skin pressed against skin in a crowded room. I caught hints of iron, the metallic tang of blood, faint and cloying. It didn't belong in the middle of a frozen forest. I froze at the threshold. The door stood half open, snow piled in its frame, footprints vanishing into the dark beyond. Something about crossing that line felt final, like a point of no return. My gut screamed at me to turn back, to run, to get in my rig and drive until I forgot this place existed. But curiosity, that poisonous little itch, pushed harder. I pulled out my flashlight and clicked it on. The beam cut through the dark, sluicing across cracked wallpaper and dust-choked furniture. The air glittered with frost and something thicker, heavier, like ash. Inside, the house was wrong. The layout didn't flow. Walls bent at angles that made no sense. Corners too sharp or too wide. A hallway stretched longer than it should have, lined with faded portraits whose faces blurred into the wallpaper. When I tried to focus, It squelched under my boots. Damp though no snow reached this far in. I kept sweeping the light, heart pounding in my ears. And then I saw them. The family. They stood in the living room, just beyond the hall, lit faintly by an orange glow that seemed to come from nowhere. The man sat in a rocking chair that creaked with each sway. Though his body was rigid, frozen, the woman knelt by the hearth, hands folded, whispering in that same broken tongue, head bobbing as if in prayer, and the boy crouched by a pile of wooden blocks, stacking them into a tower that leaned precariously with each piece. None of them moved when I stepped forward, not until the boy set the last block on the tower. Then, snap, the whole pile collapsed, scattering across the floor. He looked up at me and smiled. My chest clenched tight. The air seemed thicker in that room, humming with pressure, like standing too close to a live wire. I lifted my flashlight, and the beam stuttered, flickered, then died. The glow in the room brightened without warning, as though the walls themselves exhaled light. And I realized where it was coming from. The fireplace. It wasn't burning wood. Inside the hearth, flames licked and danced over a heap of bones. Young bones, round skulls, ribs blackened at the edges, but still recognizable. The fire fed on them, snapping with oily smoke that stung my eyes. The woman's whisper grew louder. A man's rocking chair groaned faster. The boy giggled and clapped his hands. And then, behind me, a new sound, a low growl. I spun, heart in my throat. In the doorway crouched a dog, or what had once been one. Its fur hung in tatters, patches of skin peeled to muscle. Dog, the way they looked at me, that was worse than the footsteps, worse than the whispers. Their faces didn't twitch, didn't change, but their eyes carried something sharp and hungry, like I had finally walked into their cage and shut the door behind me. The boy was the first to move. He stood, his blocks rolling away into the shadows, and padded toward me on bare feet. I swear I didn't hear them touch the floor. He stopped just a few feet away, tilting his head, as if studying me, like a child sizing up the stranger at the park. Then his mouth opened. It didn't open right. His jaw hung low, skin stretching, teeth glistening in a grin too wide for his face. "Cold night," he whispered, though his lips didn't match the words. His voice sounded doubled, layered, one high, one guttural, speaking in unison. My flashlight flickered in my hand, but the beam refused to cut the darkness around them. It felt like light itself bent away from their forms. The man in the rocking chair rose next. His movements were stiff, puppet-like, as though invisible strings dragged him upright. When he stepped forward, the boards groaned beneath his boots, but no weight seemed to land. His head tilted back, throat exposed, and I saw the jagged red line slashed from ear to ear. A wound that never closed, skin puckered and blackened around it. The woman followed. She stood smooth and graceful, hair spilling like wet seaweed down her shoulders. Her eyes glowed faintly, but not with fire, more like embers, hollow and fading, set deep in her skull. She pressed her palm against the window beside her, fingers leaving trails of frost as she dragged them down the glass. Then she turned her face toward mine, whispering louder. Words tumbling like water over rocks. That whisper burrowed into me. It wasn't English, but I felt it clawing for meaning in the back of my mind. My ears rang, my nose bled. The dog snarled again, snapping me back to myself. It crept further into the room, shoulders hunched, ribs showing through shredded hide. Its eyes didn't leave mine. And then the boy spoke again. "You followed us." His grin stretched further, blood cracking at the corners of his mouth. "You shouldn't have followed." My legs locked. My throat dried to sandpaper. Every instinct screamed at me to bolt, but I couldn't move. My body betrayed me. The man stepped closer, looming tall and stiff, like a shadow peeled off the wall. His voice crawled from his torn throat, wet and hollow. "Another one for the fire." My flashlight slipped from my hand and clattered onto the damp carpet. The beam rolled across the bones in the fireplace, flashing on something among them. Not just human skulls, smaller ones too. A child's, a dog's. The woman's whisper hit a crescendo, her words twisting in my skull like knives. My vision blurred. I staggered, grabbing at the wall, and my hand landed on something solid, an old wooden crucifix nailed crooked to the frame. The moment my palm touched it, the room bucked. The flames in the hearth sputtered, shrinking low. The family hissed in unison, the sound sharp enough to pierce my eardrums. The dog lunged, jaws snapping shut inches from my boot before retreating, tail stiff, hackles bristling like a row of knives. The boy's grin faltered. He tilted his head the other way now, eyes narrowing. "You don't belong here." The man snarled, voice tearing from his throat. "Leave." The woman stepped forward, her whisper collapsing into a scream so shrill the glass window fractured into a spiderweb of cracks. That broke me free. My legs finally obeyed. I staggered backward, knocking into a table. A porcelain lamp toppled and shattered at my feet. Pieces scattering like teeth. The family advanced as one now, shuffling, gliding, flickering in and out of focus. That, like they moved faster than my eyes could track. The boy's laugh rang sharp. The dog growled low. I turned and ran. The hallway seemed to stretch longer with each step, doors opening and closing on their own, shadows lurching across the walls. Something clawed at my jacket, tugging, but I tore free and bolted through the front door, snow biting my face as I hit the porch. The storm had swallowed the world outside, white and endless. But the footprints, I saw them glowing faintly in the snow like embers, leading uphill, away from the house. My truck was the other way, but my body didn't care. Instinct drove me after the glowing tracks, my boots pounding, lungs burning. Behind me, the house groaned like it was alive. The door slammed shut. A dog's howl split the night, carrying far too long in the storm. And I knew, without a doubt, they were coming after me. Snow swallowed sound, but I could still hear them behind me. Not footsteps, never that simple, but the creak of floorboards echoing outside, the shrill crack of glass where no windows should be, and always that child's laugh. The storm stung my face raw, wind clawing at my eyes, until tears froze on my lashes. My boots punched deep holes into the snow, but the glowing tracks ahead of me didn't sink. They offered, faint and perfect, as if someone lighter than air had left them. Every breath scraped my throat. The cold pressed in, hard enough to feel like hands squeezing my chest. Still, I ran. And then it hit me. The dog's howl, closer now, weaving through the trees. A sound that wasn't just heard, but felt, vibrating the marrow of my bones. My gut told me it wasn't only one howl anymore. I risked a glance back. At first, nothing. Just swirling white, thick enough to choke the world. Then, shapes. 3 smudges of darkness gliding between the trees, their outlines bending like heat haze. The child darted forward, too fast, his form flickering with each stride. The woman's hair trailed in the wind like seaweed in current, stretching longer than it should. The man followed, stiff but impossibly swift, arms locked straight, as if he were being pulled on invisible wires. And the dog, oh God, the dog, its head snapped between shapes, sometimes wolf, sometimes something skinless and grinning, ribs showing, each step hitting the snow with a thud far heavier than any beast its size should make. I screamed, not even a word, just raw sound tearing from my throat, and
I pushed harder uphill. My legs burned like they'd split open, but stopping wasn't an option. The glowing tracks led me to a ridge. Dot, 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 dot.
I scrambled up, clawing at roots and frozen earth, nails splitting, palms tearing. I didn't care. I had to get higher. Had to put something between me and then. When I crested the top, the storm cleared for just a moment. The house below me, it wasn't the wreck I'd seen. For a heartbeat, I saw it all. Lights in every window, smoke from the chimney, a warm glow spilling across the snow. And in that glow, figures danced. Families, dozens of them.
Children circling, dogs barking, laughter ringing out. It wasn't real. It couldn't be. But God helped me. It looked alive. The illusion cracked when one of the children turned, staring up at me with the same hollow glow in its eyes as the boy who'd smiled in the house. The wind roared, dragging me back to reality. The three shapes had reached the bottom of the ridge. They didn't climb like me. They flickered upward, each time a few feet.
Closer, as if reality itself bent to pull them forward. I turned and ran along the ridge, following the glowing tracks. My boots slipped, snow tearing away beneath me, revealing black rock and dead roots. The storm screamed louder, twisting into voices that didn't belong to the wind. Cold night, the child's doubled voice. Another for the fire. The man's guttural rasp. Stay, the woman's whisper, closer than my own breath. I stumbled, skidding to my knees. The glowing tracks ended at a crooked fence, half buried in snow. Beyond it loomed a small graveyard, stones tilted and broken, names etched so deep with time they looked like scars. I didn't think. I vaulted the fence, nearly face-planting in the snow, and crawled between two gravestones. My body pressed into the icy ground, as if stone could shield me. The storm paused. No wind. No sound. Just silence, heavy enough to crush the air from my lungs. Then, faintly, whispers, dozens of them, rising from the graves around me. Some soft as lullabies, others hoarse as dying breaths. The air grew warm, damp. Steam rose from the snow. My heart thundered. And that's when I realized the whispers weren't pushing me away. They were holding me here, protecting me. The figures appeared at the fence line, silhouettes against the swirling dark. They didn't cross. The man hissed, shoulders jerking. The woman screamed, sound cracking glass that wasn't there. The child pressed his face between the slats, grinning wide, eyes glowing hotter. but they didn't step in. Not one. The dog paced along the fence, hackles high, lips peeled back in a snarl. It circled, then howled so loud, I thought the graves beneath me shook. But still, it didn't cross. I stayed low, barely breathing, staring at them through the gaps. Minutes, maybe hours, I don't know. My body froze to the ground. My lips turned numb. Finally, the storm shifted. The wind picked up. The snow spun wild again. And when I blinked, just once, they were gone. No man, no woman, no boy, no dog. Just snow and silence. But when I pushed myself up, shivering, blood dried to my nose, I saw something. Carved into the gravestone beside me, fresh, not weathered, a single word, jagged like it had been scratched by hand only hours before. Run. When I finally stumbled out of that graveyard, I didn't feel like I was walking anymore. My legs moved, sure, but they weren't mine. They were machines pushing through snow, stiff and senseless, carrying me forward, because stopping wasn't an option. The storm had thinned by then. Not clear, never clear, but lighter. I could see the line of trees bending ahead, their branches clawing together like fingers. Beyond them, a faint orange glow. Not ghostly this time. Real. Fire. I clawed toward it, half on my knees, half dragging myself over the drifts. My lungs burned like I'd swallowed acid. Every inhale, a scrape of knives. But that glow pulled me forward. Hope or bait. I wasn't sure anymore. When I finally broke through the tree line, the world tilted. Headlights. An old pickup truck idled on the roadside, its beams slicing through the swirling snow. A man stood outside it, bundled in a thick parka and fur-lined hat, lantern swinging in one gloved hand. He squinted at me like I was a hallucination crawling out of the storm. Jesus Christ, he muttered, rushing forward. Heat blasted out. Real heat. The cab's heater roared, smelling of old leather, motor oil, and wet dog. I collapsed inside, head against the dash, body shaking so violently, my teeth cracked against each other. The man climbed in after me, shutting the storm out with a slam. He cranked the heater higher and shoved a thermos into my hands. Drink, he ordered. Hot, bitter coffee scalded my tongue and throat, but it was life. I gulped, like I hadn't seen liquid in years. My stomach rolled, but I didn't care. After a minute, he asked, "Where the hell you come from?" "Nobody's out here this time of night. Not in this weather." My lips moved before my brain caught up. "The house," I whispered. His eyes flicked to me sharp. "What house?" I licked cracked lips. "Old place, down past the ridge. Had a fence. Graves."
I saw. My voice faltered. Saying it out loud felt like signing my own death warrant. But his face told me he already knew. He leaned back, exhaling slow. Oh, hell. He rubbed his glove over his jaw, shaking his head. Should have known. Known what? I asked, voice trembling. He hesitated, like a man deciding whether to hand someone the rope or the knife. Then he sighed, heavy as a tombstone. "You stumbled on the parlor place," he said. "A name meant nothing." My blank stare must have told him that, because he went on. "Happened in 1915. Whole family murdered in that house. Father, mother, and the boy. Folks said it was the work of drifters, but, well, no one ever caught anyone. Town buried him right there on the property. Only people kept seeing things, hearing things. Hunters, travelers, even cops. Dot. It's a town that buried everyone in the house. All the same story. 3 figures, sometimes a dog, always in the snow." He rubbed his hands together, like he could scrub the memory off. "After a while, folks just stopped going near it. Road crews quit plowing that way, let the place rot. The cab's heater clicked. Outside, the storm howled against the glass. My heart thudded in my ears. So, that was them," I whispered. "The family." He nodded grimly. "Yeah, or what's left." His voice dropped low, almost drowned by the heater. "They say the father never wanted to leave the land. Always swore he'd keep the place safe. Folks figure he's still trying. And the boy? The boy likes to play." I felt bile crawl up my throat. My hands shook so badly, the thermos nearly slipped. "What about the dog?" I forced out. The man's face tightened. He didn't look at me when he answered. Dot wasn't theirs. Silence stretched. Finally, I asked, "And whose was it?" They were soaked, frozen solid. But the snow clinging to them wasn't fresh. It was black, ashen like soot. I hadn't run out of the storm. I'd run out of the fire. I stayed with that man until morning. He never told me his name, and I never asked. Maybe I didn't want to know. He drove me into town, dropped me off at a diner before the sun clawed through the snow clouds, and vanished before I could even thank him, like he hadn't been real at all. The waitress gave me a look I'll never forget. I must have looked like I'd clawed my way out of the grave. Pale, hollow-eyed, clothes still damp and half frozen. She brought me coffee without asking, then went back to avoiding my booth. It took 3 more hours
before I could bring myself to step outside again. The roads had been plowed, the sky a dull gray, snow still drifting, but lighter. My truck was right where I'd left it, untouched, like nothing had ever happened. The door opened without a problem. The heater roared to life as soon as I turned the key. My logbook sat on the dash. My sleeping bag was folded neat behind the seat. All normal. But when I pulled the curtains back to check the cab windows, my stomach turned to ice. Handprints. 3 of them. Faint, but there, smeared across the glass in long, streaky arcs. One small, like a child's. One narrow, delicate. One broad and rough. Frost had formed around the prints, almost like the glass itself recoiled. I sat there, staring until my chest hurt. Then I did the only thing I could. I turned the ignition and drove. Miles peeled away under my tires. The snow thinned. Civilization returned. Gas stations, trucks, the rhythm of life. By the time I hit the interstate again, I almost convinced myself it hadn't happened. Just a nightmare brought on by exhaustion, cold, and too much coffee. Almost. But the thing is, nightmares don't leave souvenirs. When I finally pulled into a rest stop that afternoon, I climbed out to check the rig. There, stuck in the frozen mud of my wheel well, was something that shouldn't have been there. A piece of wood, weathered, blackened at the edges like it had been burned. Carved into it was a word. Stay. I dropped it like it was poison. Stomped it down into the snow until it disappeared. Climbed back in my cab and drove harder than I ever had in my life. I've been on the road 8 years. I've hauled through every storm this country's got. But I'll tell you this, no paycheck, no deadline, no dispatcher in the world could make me drive through that stretch of forest again. I reroute every time. Adds hours, sometimes days. I don't care. Because I know what waits there. And every winter when the storms roll in and snow blinds the world, I can't shake the thought. Maybe they're still walking. Maybe they're still looking. Maybe next time they'll find another truck parked on the shoulder, another tired driver pulling his curtains closed, thinking he's safe. So if you're ever out there running freight through the mountains when the snow comes down hard and you hear footsteps crunching outside your cab, don't open the curtain, don't unlock the door, and if you hear a child's voice whisper your name, don't wave back.